Welcome everyone to Realmbound. Realmbound is a puzzle platformer where you have to use moments of platforming skill, but mostly solve puzzles using your mind and thus getting to the end of the game. Our core mechanic revolves around having two characters that you switch between. They're obviously Realmbound. So welcome everyone and let's get into it. Welcome to the tutorial level where I will now demonstrate the core mechanic. You press the assigned button and thus you switch control over to the other character, and the realm also changes. This concept is used in all our puzzles and all the gameplay. You have to use both characters at all times, they have to work together, and you have to use them to solve puzzles and get through the levels. The wooden character's main ability is the fact that he directly interacts with the world. He's the one taking the damage, he's the one that you need to get to the end point to finish the level, he's the one that can activate switches, stand on buttons, henceforth. That is his ability. That means the game sort of revolves around him, and the other character is the one you need to use to help the wooden character get to the end of the game. The ghost's main ability is to be creating platforms. These platforms will help the other character traverse the levels and help him get through certain obstacles. That mechanic went through various variations. At first we decided we only want the bone to be created once, and then the player has to wait for it to despawn by allowing the timer to run out, and then only then can they create a new platform. This confused most players. They didn't know about the timer. They felt they should create a new platform, so we changed it. We allowed the player to despawn the old platform, and then they'd be able to create a new one. This did not solve the problem. The players understood the restriction, but they still always felt like they should be able to create a new platform. At the reason we were hesitant to give them infinite platforms is we didn't want them to break the level and reach infinite heights. But since all our levels we designed around having the other character, the wooden character, get to the end point to finish the level, it didn't matter that the ghost could create infinite platforms, because it wasn't him that needed to get to the end point. He's only sort of an extension as the wooden character. He's his own character, but he's a tool that the wooden character uses to complete the level in a gameplay sense. So this, we changed it to infinite bones, and the movement instantly felt much better. It felt like that's the way it should have been since the start. The players can still despawn the bone, and that is used in puzzles. And thus we found out the best variation for this mechanic, and we stuck with it. Since our game is both 2D and a platformer, another game we naturally looked towards for inspiration was Hollow Knight. Since Hollow Knight is a great example of a platformer, it is a terrific game, and we looked a lot at Hollow Knight when it came to how jumping should work, moving should work, how platforms should work, how the environment should look like. But the inspiration kinda had to stop when it came to the gameplay, since Hollow Knight is very high intensity, combat focused, and our game does not have that. We felt from the start that having two characters and focusing too heavily on combat would be too much to ask from the players. If you have to constantly switch between characters, manage them both during combat, so we naturally evolved towards the puzzle element and not focusing on combat where you necessarily have to fight enemies and dodge projectiles. I will now show you an example of how this puzzle incorporates our core mechanic and the use of both characters. In our puzzle here we have a few elements. We have buttons that gets activated when the wooden character walks on them. We have a totem at the top moving. It is following whoever you're controlling at the moment. This totem also clearly can interact with buttons. This button in the middle resets the totem back to its starting position. Now, as I said, the ghost doesn't have the ability like the wooden character to interact with the world, but since this totem at the top follows whoever you're controlling at the moment, it gives the ghost the ability to interact with the world. You thus have to use this totem to get to the other button and activate both buttons to finish the level. But as you see, this button resets a totem and sets it back to the start. This requires you to use the ghost's other ability, which is creating a platform to stop the totem from activating the reset button, but rather activating the second torch. In this way, you completed the level by using a core mechanic of switching between the two characters and also using the ghost platform ability. Our puzzles work in this way, where you have to use the elements around the core mechanic, and the puzzle elements are always centered around switching between the characters and using their abilities. Now, our game doesn't have any upgrade systems or any ways of improving the character, so we had to make sure our puzzles introduce new elements for the player to feel a sense of progression. They're learning new puzzle elements and they're learning how to use these new puzzle elements to finish levels, and in this way they are improving as a player and improving the skill set of the character and feeling a sense of progression. Like I said, our game is also a puzzle platformer, so there is platforming sections in the game. We introduce these throughout the puzzle levels to get the player used to platforming sections that actually require skill and them mastering the jumping and timing of platforming. At the end, we have a big platforming level that we introduced, and there we had to make sure that now the ghost actually follows the player, that the ghost that hasn't done the entire game throughout. Because when you have to switch back and forth between the characters, it becomes artificial difficulty of struggling with the controls of the game rather than having to use good platforming to complete the level, and thus we created this section where the ghost actually follows the player. Right at the end of the game, we have the culmination of our game. We introduce a boss that requires you to use the timing and the skill you learned from the platforming, but it is not just normal combat. Like we we didn't have any of that previously in the game, so we added a thinking element to the boss. We have to use puzzle elements to beat the boss. We also make sure you use both characters, and thus we introduced back the totem elements that lets the ghost directly interact with the world to defeat the boss. Thank you very much for listening to me rambling about the game. I hope you get to play it and enjoy it when you do play it. Cheers for now.